What we're going to do is we're going to continue solving using cross multiplying. Remember, we always use cross multiplying when we have two terms. So in this case, we have one term on the left-hand side, and we have one term on the right-hand side. Now, if we look at letter D, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cross multiply, and we end up with x squared equals 9. This is a little bit different than the other two. We have an x squared by itself. We have a 9 by itself. So in order to get rid of the x squared, we're going to take the square root. And whenever we take a square root, what we have to remember is that there's two roots. There's a positive root and a negative root. So our answer is plus or minus 3. Now, looking at letter E, we're going to do the same thing. Our first step is always cross multiplying. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross multiply x squared plus 8x equals negative 15. Notice that we have an x squared. This is a quadratic. It's different than the one that we did before. Here we only had an x squared. Here we have an x squared and an x. So what we have is a trinomial. If you remember, whenever we have a quadratic, what we're going to do is we're going to set it equal to 0. So we're going to add the 15. And we get x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So we're going to look for two numbers that multiply together, give us 15, and add up to 8. So what we would have is 5 and 3. That means we have x plus 5, x plus 3 equals 0. So our two answers are whatever gives us 0. Negative 5, negative 3. And those would be our two answers. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I'm confused because this one's a quadratic and we did something different. Well, you could actually solve this one the same way that we solved letter E. We could have taken the x squared equals 9, and we could have set it equal to 0 also. And we would have gotten x squared minus 9 equals 0. And some of you might be noticing it. This right here is a special factoring pattern. So it's x minus 3 and x plus 3 equals 0. So our two answers are 3 and negative 3. Notice that we get the same answer here as we do here. I think this method is a little bit easier, but if you get confused, you're always welcome to factor every time and get your two answers. Now, let's look at our last one. It's going to be similar to letter C. What we're going to do is we're going to always do the same thing, cross multiply. X squared plus x equals negative 8. Once again, like we always do with quadratics, we have to set it equal to 0. X squared plus x plus 8 equals 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to factor it, but a lot of you have already noticed it. There is nothing that we can multiply together to give us 8 and add up to 1. So that means what we have to do is a quadratic formula. With the quadratic formula, our A value is 1, our B value is 1, and our C value is 8. So when we're plugging it in, we're going to go x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8 over 2 times 1. We get x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root 1 minus 32 all over 2. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, I know what's going to happen next, and you're absolutely right. What we notice is that when we subtract the 1 and the 32, we get negative 31. And we can't take a square root of a negative, so our answer is no solution. And once again, the reason that it's no solution is if we look inside of our square root, notice that we have a negative.